list of the types of families that you can have, but I'm going to list a couple and see if anything like resonates with you, or the characters that you wanted to be part of your family, or other characters that you think might kind of exemplify this family dynamic. So we have the nuclear family, which is like the basic, stereotypical, traditional parents and children, basic family arrangement, but also super rife with complexity. And even in that, like even in that simple dynamic, there's like sibling relationships, there's birth order, there's toxic parenting, there's attachment styles. We'll get into a little bit of that if we have time. Extended family. The extended family are grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins, great-grandparents if need be, ancestors. Some people live with their extended family, others don't, but it varies from family. There's families with working parents. So in the traditional nuclear family, we have one working parent and one non-working parent. But in this dynamic, both parents work. Single parents, that's pretty self-explanatory. Older parents who don't kind of fit into this like nuclear stereotype of having kids in their 20s or 30s. Actually, Flema Potter and Euphemia Potter were both considered to be older parents, so I thought that was really interesting when I was reading up. Younger parents, so like James and Lily Potter, they're in their early 20s. Step families. I don't know if I would consider like the Dursley step families, but close. Adopting, so adoptive families. And then I chose the Marauders, which is not necessarily a family dynamic that's commonly thought of, but it's what we call a chosen family. So those are some of the different types of family dynamics. Does anyone like hear those words and kind of resonate with them as far as their characters' families?
One thing is, it seems like each of those is a separate. It sort of seems like it's separate, but it's not. So I imagine a different system, which is all collection of features instead of like hard-coded different systems.
Can you elaborate on that?
So in other words, plus young parents might be a feature, but plus step might also be a feature. They could coexist. And so there's a set. So each collection. So it's separate things don't work, I think, as well as some sort of.
It's like overlapping Venn diagrams.
Yeah, absolutely.
No, that is equivalent.
Yeah. So I forget what I was saying about the Potters. I was going to focus on the Potters for a second and kind of think about their dynamic. So you have Euphemia and Flema Potter, who are older parents who give birth to James Potter, who is an only child. So in that way, they are the typical nuclear family, but they also have older parent style. And then because it's an only child, that also affects the dynamic. If James were to have a younger sibling or an older sibling, he might have been a totally different person than the one we saw in canon. And then when he was older, he had a child very young, so he was like 20 something. 21. So that changes the dynamic and how he raised or didn't raise his own child. So there's a lot of like, when you're examining family dynamics, there's a lot of that overlap, and there's a lot of like going back and back and back and back to see where you messed up, essentially.
I don't know what's happening.
So I kind of looked at this from a like more of a therapy standpoint. So some of the questions, like if I were to do a session about family with one of the characters from the book, let's stick with Harry, just because he seems to be on it.
I think there's one right there.
Some of these introductory questions are what I would do to make something like a genogram or kind of an assessment. So what do you consider your family structure to be? What is your definition of family? Are there any rules in your family? Do you follow any family traditions? And Harry himself, I think, has a very interesting definition of what family is. How do you define family? I think that's a hard question in and of itself. That could be a whole discussion. We don't have time. But yeah, so open floor for how do you define family? How would you answer that question with or without the context of the universe?
I don't think I can define it, but I can bring up elements that I require.
Okay.
I guess one of the most important to me would be inherent trust. Like if I don't trust you, I can't consider you part of my family. That's a pretty important element.
How can I follow that up? How do you develop trust with somebody like thinking back as you as a child, how can you develop trust with a person?
I guess essentially you have to take a chance, and then you see what happens, and so you test out with more important things to see at what point that holds up, and if that trust is ever broken, you have to make a decision as to like the circumstances at hand and whether or not you want to skip over or see where to go from there.
I'm just gonna build off what John said. Like, trust is definitely important. Like, the Dursleys never gave Harry any reason to trust them for anything.
Yeah.
And Harry, I don't think he would consider the Dursleys family.
Yeah.
I mean, he definitely has some attachment to them, but it's not like happy or emotional attachment.
Yeah. I would also argue that he didn't trust them, but I would argue that they didn't trust him either. Because he was someone totally outside of their family dynamic.
He also terrified them.
He also terrified them, yeah. So that trust thing has to go both ways. And for parents of new children, that's a really complicated thing to navigate. Because how do you trust something that is just not capable of anything? And then the babies, like, how can you not trust the people who are supposed to be taking care of you? So that kind of goes into attachment style, and we'll talk about that in a second. But did anyone else want to discuss like what their definition of family is, and maybe how it relates to the universe? I'm gonna ask first.
And second, yeah.
I don't know if I have a definition, just like a general thought, like if you're thinking
That's a
of
pass.
as an individual
Those are only
thinking,
You don't like them?
how do I define my family? I think that changes as you get older. Like I think it makes sense as you get older you can choose more what your family is. But I would still consider a family kind of the people who are
I don't know that they're
as
good
a
either.
child they've set to take care of you in your foundation and in your, whether it's a good family or a bad family or, you know, supportive or not supportive or all these things. Like when you're little, you kind of are with whoever you're with and that's your family. But as you get older, it changes. Like, I think.
Yeah.
They don't want it.
I don't. So I always say nothing in life is concrete. So I think that kind of what you're saying is like even if you have this family dynamic when you're younger, and that family dynamic doesn't necessarily change, but as an adult you kind of develop more dynamics within your so family dynamics don't have to be they don't have to be
Can you cut me a piece?
concrete your whole life.
Fixed.
What?
Fixed.
Fixed, thank you.
One thing that's making it a little complicated is I think there's really two terms for family. There's, well, I don't know, I'm going to make it up. An institutional family and a spiritual family. Right? So a spiritual family is basically, I'm saying, is the one that you're talking about with involving trust and all that. Institutional family is family due to being born or legal things or adoption or whatever. And of course they can be the same, but it seems like they're different concepts because there is this idea that sometimes families isn't working and people aren't trusting each other, but then by definition it's based on trust and they wouldn't be family. So
That's
you
based
need
on
both
John's
of these.
definition.
Right, but
And John's definition may be very different than your definition.
right, but I'm saying that it seems like both concepts are needed in order to explain it. Otherwise, you couldn't say why it wasn't working.
And I don't mean to say that to invalidate your
No, not at all.
I just want to kind of make that point of like everyone is going to have a very different definition of what a family is based on their experiences, their traditions, their religion, their culture, what have you. Some people don't don't consider extended family to be different than their nuclear family dynamic. So, you know, when I say the definition differs, that's not to like validate or deny anything.
But at the same time, if we're not talking about the same thing, it gets hard.
Yeah.
So it makes sense to maybe have some separate classifications in order to say what we're saying.
Well, that I would say that if you take away nothing else from tonight, you should take away that family is complicated. I feel like the thesis statement of today's
There's
discussion.
this politician who keeps saying things that are complicated, that they didn't expect to be complicated.
I mean, that's what people don't expect babies to be complicated. Babies are super complicated. You had your hand up in the back.
I did. I just wanted to say I really like John's definition for family, but it's, to me that sounds more like the ideal family that one could have. I think it's good that someone floated the term institutional family, because there is family that you might not necessarily trust or even like, but you still, I mean, at least in my world, you still have to consider them family, and they still have that term family, that label family on them. So I think it's a really good question, and I think there's a lot of different definitions for it, which is what makes it so hard to deal with family. But yeah, so I'm not really sure how I would define it for myself, but there's just this thing that there is family that you might not trust or like, but like you still call it family. And I would really like to know how John puts that in his like how that could be part of your definition. I'd be curious to hear about that. Not to put you on the spot.
No, that's fine. It's actually interesting what several people have been saying about. Because I know that my angle comes from the fact that I've done something that a lot of people don't necessarily have the opportunity or the ability to do, and that I've essentially rejected parts of my family, which took a very, very, very long time to do, and it was essentially almost like a trial by fire to accomplish that, and I decided to restructure a family for myself based on my own criteria. And the term institutional family has been used here, which is fine, and I understand that structure, and I understand that most people, that is what they, I hate to say this, are quote unquote stuck with. Like people have their family that has happened genetically or through circumstance or through birth or adoption or whatnot, and they don't have the option to restructure that as they like. So my own definition is based on that. I'm not privileged, because that's not privilege. It's like just my own fortune being able to do that. But also, some people wouldn't consider that a fortune. So I think that whole, whether or not a family is institutional, whether or not it's found, or whether or not it has, I think it's completely personal to that individual. And even if they don't have that choice, which is, in my opinion, unfortunate, it's still the definition that pertains to them.
Yeah, I think, so thank you for sharing that. I appreciate you sharing your personal experience with us. But I think that you're touching on some really good points, is this idea that an institutional family, or I kind of like that word, that institutional, because it does kind of bring about this very rigid structure. It's very obvious. It's very obvious to an outside viewer. It is set. It is kind of like, okay, it's either a nuclear family, or it's an adoptive family, or it's a family that you married into, and that's where you are. And there, with institution, there is this kind of connotation of being stuck, or having to be set there, which is an interesting. That's why I think it's such an interesting term. And not everybody feels comfortable leaving that. Some people do need to leave that family, but because of cultural tradition, because of outside pressure, they choose to stay in that institutional family, and then ideally they'll find a support system that's outside of that family. Whether or not that becomes chosen family is kind of their own definition of it, but I think that is something that is very uncommon. I think it's becoming a little bit more common now that we kind of understand family dynamics in a little bit more concrete way. I know in my own experience at my practices, like that's something I deal with a lot with my students and my clients, kind of like cutting themselves off from toxic family. So, and again, like, thank you, I just want to acknowledge, like, you shared a personal experience, but it also brings up some really good ones. I saw a bunch of hands, and I'm forgetting the order. It was you, and then Marlena, and then Francisco.
I'm not exactly sure what I'm trying to express, but I was thinking about what John said about trust. And I think a lot of it, especially when you're little, is you're sort of cast in a role in your family, whether you like it or not. You're the black sheep, you're the sensitive one, you're the artistic one, whatever they've decided you are. And in Harry's case, he was just probably scapegoated, yet those were still his people, even as horrible as they were. And he went back for Dudley when he did not get attacked. He still was. But he went back and put his arm around him and he took him all the way home. Because that's still part of his people.
Right, he still has
so,
an attachment.
yeah, there's something, and it's complicated.
And I think it's worth noting that the person that he saved is somebody that he did have a relationship with after they matured and kind of grew past some of their trauma relating to their parents, which is a new dynamic too. And then they, in my own fantasy, in my own headcanon, they become like really close. And, their kids go to Hogwarts together, and it's Marlena and Francisco, and then.
So like there's like the like the institutional family, like my blood family, and I'm not super close to most of them, like outside of like my parents and my younger sister, but like the chosen family element, which like is a big thing of like your friends, and I always view that kind of as like the people who like picked you and you picked them to like share in like all of your life, so like your happiness, but also like when you're going through like a shitty situation or like you're not doing so bad, it's the people who are always there for you in that. Like that is something of like trust, but also just like it's a constant like reaffirmation of like you are deciding to have that relationship, and like there's nothing like there's no genetics keeping you together. Like you're it's like it's the trust and the bond of like we're gonna go through like all of the highs and lows of life together, and we're choosing that because we care about each other.
Ride or die.
It's very active.
Yeah, ride or die.
It's very active.
Yeah.
And I would say that you can also share your genetics with the chosen family.
Yeah.
But typically that's not the case.
Yeah.
Just statistically.
I feel like outside of like maybe like you have one person from like your genetic bloodline that's in your chosen family.
That's hitting the lottery.
Yeah. One person you get along with in your chosen in your biology.
Again, in my fantasy, that's Harry and Dudley in the future, and then the rest of them.
The rest.
Like Harry shares his genetics with Dudley, and he has, again, headcanon mostly, but that's that. I think that my fantasy is that they become chosen family as well as biological family.
Francisco?
Oh yeah, no, I was trying to like defining family for me is a bit weird because like being from immigrants, I don't have family in the United States. So it's really odd. It's like I have my parents and my siblings, and that's it. Like that is like in my head, and I don't care necessarily about because I do have cousins in Texas. I have cousins elsewhere, and like they're my family. But it's a weird like the closeness to that isn't there. So it's like it's kind of odd. It's like well, I'm not sure how to define it because I don't actually have. Like my aunts and uncles are in different states, different countries. Like I don't have any cousins like in the United States, pretty much, except maybe like 4 or 5, and they're scattered. So it's like a weird like that I consider them family, but like that. What is family? It's like it's more my friends than anything else because they're the ones who I talk to the most. Like I have to like kind of force to talk to my sister or my brother because we're all older. We're spaced far apart, so we don't share a lot of like I'm like 6 years apart both ways. So we don't really share a friend group. It's weird. It's like I'm not exactly sure what family is. It's like a tough, especially since I just don't have family per se. Like even that institutional family is just parents.
And that for some people is what the definition is, and that's fine. Again, I'm gonna kind of reiterate like family definitions is complicated and can be a whole grad school lecture that I had to sit through. But everyone who's kind of sharing their definitions, all these are valid. None of them are less valid than others. And all of them are going to be different, and that's cool. The reason why it's so important to kind of explore these feelings is to understand what the family dynamics mean to you as a person, as a self, but also as a self in context of your relationship to others, which is a very therapy thing to say. But it is so the reason why it's so complicated, I mean, people go to therapy for years to figure out family dynamics. We're doing it in 2 hours. So it's totally okay not to have answers to these questions. You can do it. And then
Yes. I'm sorry, I forgot your name. Jacob.
you're gonna ask. So he had his hand up, so I'm gonna ask for a second, and then we'll come back to you. Did you wanted to pass? You forgot what you were saying. Okay. If you remember, we'll come back. Jacob.
I was going to say what Francisco was saying was interesting, because my family is here, I'm in New York. One side of my family is all in New York, and I've had interactions with them, and they're good people, and if I didn't see them ever again in my life, I would have no reaction to this at all. And it's not animosity. It's not my family is my immediate biological family. One cousin who is also a friend, much more of a friend relationship, and my very small group of friends. So it's just kind of interesting. There's no spatial thing. It's just all cultural, I guess.
Yes, and it's who I think you made an important distinction is your cousin, who is your biological family. You still have this very platonic relationship with them. You still have the same feelings you have for them. And that is almost more important than the biological aspect. And I think that's kind of related to what Marlena said earlier about chosen family, how it can be genetic, but it doesn't have to.
Yeah, so just one also gray area. There's this concept, close circle of friends, which I think is, very important people to everybody. And it seems like there is some sort of continuum between that and this really sort of chosen family. And so I'm wondering where the line is.
Just used to that.
So,
Still have kids?
when I talk about Harry, Hermione, and Ron, who considers that a family? Does anyone not consider that a family?
Can we be on the fence about it?
No, we can be honest. I'm not gonna judge you for not speaking.
The waters are brought up a lot. Why are the waters?
So I'm gonna give my opinion, and I'm curious to hear about the people who raise their hands for not a family. So my opinion is that chosen family, the friends that you make, the friends that you spend most of your time with, the friends who trust, that concept of ride or die, I'm gonna be with you no matter what. That can be a family. That is a valid family dynamic.
Sorry to interject. There's nothing more ride or die than the Marauders.
Right. I want to be part of this story. I want to be around.
Oh, you took it there. That was wrong.
You just.
Well, I'm gonna distinguish that between close circle of friends and the definition, the way that I see it. So the golden trio, Ron, Harry, Hermione, and close circle of friends. Harry with Fred, George, Bill, Charlie, Percy, and the rest of the Weasleys. Would you consider Harry and those brothers family, or would you consider them close friends?
Harry and who?
So you see, there's a distinguish, there's a difference. Or Harry with the Quidditch team. Those are close friends. Those are people that he trusts very much. Those are people that he spends a lot of time with. Those are people that he practices with. Not necessarily the same feeling as a family. That's how I distinguish it in my head. Does anyone have different?
You could also just have different closenesses of circles. The closest circle is equivalent to what you're saying is the chosen family. So the question is why use one term versus the other?
So why?
Why not say these are my closest circle of friends versus this is my chosen family?
That's a distinguish. That's the distinction that I think people have to make for themselves. That's an individual choice.
Well, it might be a difference without a distinction without a difference.
Say that one more time.
It might be a distinction without a difference. Just a
Yeah.
difference. So in other words, there's this a new term that's replacing the old term.
possible. So I'm going to reiterate that is an individual choice. So like you saw that there were people in this room who said the golden trio was definitely a family, and then there are people who raised their hand to say no, they're not necessarily a family. They might agree with your definition that it's a close circle of friends. They might have a different definition for what that relationship is. But again, it comes down to individual definitions, like we talked about, and the validity of those individual decisions don't invalidate other people's choices.
Correct.
So that's also like a blanket statement for this conversation.
Yes.
No one is judging anyone for having these different opinions. They really do. Okay, I forgot who raised their hand. There was a whole bunch of you.
Oh, is it? I'm sorry.
For the non-chosen family?
Yeah, like.
All right, so I'm gonna go.
I'll
Just go in a
proceed.
circle. It's easiest.
Or,
Oh, okay. All right. So there'll be me, then Jen. And
Marlena.
oh, I'm sorry. You're in my blind spot. I'm sorry about that. You go ahead, then I'll go after you.
Okay, I was just gonna say that my distinction between like really close friends and like chosen family for me, like it goes back to like the people who share like the highs. Like my friends are the people who share my highs and share kind of like my like day-to-day shitty situation. But the people I would go to with like my serious emotional problems, or that I would talk to and like grieve with and celebrate, like always do that. Like that's the chosen family, and like that's what distinguishes like the golden trio from like Harry's other group of friends. It's like they tend to share his highs, but like if he's really struggling, I feel like he tends to go to one of them more, like either Harry or either Ron or Hermione more.
Yeah, and they're consistent.
Yeah.
Circle.
Yeah. So, one of the things that we haven't really, I haven't heard yet, that I think is one of the many ways to define Harry's relationships is that I think of the Weasleys to Harry as his extended family. I mean, before he even marries into them, and then he marries into them. so it's like even
on the paperwork.
Yeah. Even early on, like there were Weasleys that would like throw down if anything happened to Harry. Like
Ron literally gave up his life.
well, the trio is one thing. The trio is like that, and then you have what I'm thinking is more like Fred and George. Yeah, Fred and George are the extended family who like 99% of the time they're like, okay, those three are having their. But like, let's say someone like punched Harry, like Fred and George would throw down.
Yeah.
So it's sort of like when your cousins suddenly come out of the bodega and they're like, you know. So I think it's one of those things that we're like yet another definition to add to it is you have the extended, which isn't necessarily there all the time, but when the shit hits the fan, they're there.
Yeah, that's absolutely totally valid. Jen.
So I'm one of those people that raised their hand to say that I don't think that the trio is chosen family. I think they're a very tight-knit group of friends. And, I mean, they're obviously best friends. They've shared highs and lows together. I don't think that necessarily is a thing that defines chosen family. I think that, in my personal opinion, the thought process behind chosen family is typically that there's something lacking in your actual family. I don't know if that was mentioned earlier. Whether that's trust or love, or it could be any manner of things. But I think why the Weasleys are Harry's chosen family, them becoming his actual family, I think he sees what he thinks of as a family in his head amongst them, even when he first interacts with them. Like, oh, there's an overprotective mom, there's a blah blah blah, you know, like there's a kid who's making jokes about his little brother, making, you know, there's a family dynamic, exactly. And I think that's why he probably says that's my, or like if he were to voice it, he would say that's my chosen family, or that family chose me, or I'm part of their chosen family, what have you. But or vice versa, yeah. And I think the reason I don't think that necessarily the trio is because that bond is something that some sort of forms not only out of necessity, but out of just circumstance. And typically when you're talking about like a chosen family, it's not something that like necessarily evolves based on your environment, at least in my personal experience. I think it's there's an agency involved in it. You like it's either a conscious or an unconscious agency. I can't really put it into words. Again, I'm not a therapist. However, I think like a good example for me, and I can again speak better from my own personal experience. So I have 3 really great friends from college. We're incredibly tight. We've been tight for, God, going on 16 years now. And like, you know, they came out to support me when I ran like the marathon this weekend, and like they were there at like dinner afterwards, and like it was a really big thing, and like it was really great. But like, you know, my chosen family are like the people from like Potter, like the people like some of the people in this room, and like, you know, like those people will always be there to understand all the full facets of me. Where like my friends from college, like they're only really gonna ever understand like a portion of it. You know, it's kind of like that. Like I feel like maybe Harry and Ron and Hermione share almost everything, even like those adventures and highs and lows. But like, you know, when Harry realizes that his feelings for Ginny are more serious or whatever, that's like, I want to give everything to this person. I want to bear everything to this person. So that's just my reasoning behind the choice.
Was it Francisco was next, I think?
No,
Oh, okay.
Your turn, circle.
No,
So there are people in the circle behind you.
During the line.
So
Okay.
who was next in this section?
I did.
Okay, just chill. Irvin, we'll get to you. It's all right. Breathe.
But sorry, do you
You're not Irvin, I know.
Sorry.
When I think of, I obviously think of the kind of poetry of the family, but I think about Hermione a lot, because I would like identify a lot with her in that like, she has like perfectly wonderful parents, but then she has to like go be a wizard. And then like that like she has to seek out her own new family. Like her family no longer has like any sense of like her whole self. And I often think about that. Like I moved to New York City and like got really geeky and gay. And like
New York will do that.
I used to think of myself see my mother at my wedding being like, some of my friends dress up in costumes. All the time we're just gonna do this. Having to explain yourself, I feel like that's a lot as like she had to go home and be like, well, that's just the wizards just do that. And no, I don't need a cell phone. Wizards don't have them. And just being like, I mean, I definitely think of them as a family because Hermione needed a family. She like just bought her way, not bought her way. That sounds terrible. She just like got herself into a family. She needed it. She needed one. Yeah.
Now it's the rest of the circle. I lost
Which way?
So I guess it is Irvin then, right?
It's gonna go this way.
I'm confused. I'm sorry. Like,
It's gonna go
all right.
Urban.
Okay, so we started from this side now. Okay, got it.
Okay. All of you have sort of one by one raised a disconnect that I had in the books, and I always tried to get past it, and it's really raising this issue and I don't think Rowling knew how to address it. It was like, why didn't Ginny go look for the Horcruxes too? This was like huge to me when I read the books. It didn't make any sense. I didn't understand it. They couldn't do 4 instead of 3. You know, they're all upset because he was never going to see Ginny again. I'm like, well, why don't you ask her to come? You know, she knows how to cast spells. You know, and it sort of is bordering on this conversation about, you know, who is family, who is not family. They didn't feel close, you know, for whatever reason, the special 3 didn't feel close enough that they were going to include her, even though she was right there all the time. And then also with that, you know, from the very first book, Ron, you know, almost, you know, chooses to sacrifice his life for Harry when they go through the wizarding test. And he's just like, gotta do this, you know, the level of sacrifice between the 3 of them is very intense. And so, you know, once again, it goes back to definitions of family. How do you define family? Ron leaves them on the road trip because he's so mad that he comes back. You know, it's really, it talks about a lot of those family dynamics and the intensity of the relationships that they have. And I had a really hard time getting over that when I read the books. Why didn't Ginny go?
Yeah, I think I didn't think about it that intensely when I read it, but now that you're bringing it up, I'm like, oh, like this is, you know, so Ginny can be included in that chosen family dynamic as well. And see you, relax. And it can be argued that Harry was like, so, you know, he really like has, I mean, he has a martyr a mile wide. So the idea that the sacrifice dynamic that all three of them share did kind of apply in that way. Like, I'm not going to let you come, but I might not for you and the rest of the wizarding world, but extra you. But it's definitely, especially, so I'm kind of feeling this interesting, that's also a really great example of a dynamic shift. So you have this kind of well-rounded, close trio of people, and now there's like this extra member. Like, even though they're kind of, Ginny was kind of always involved with, Ginny was always kind of involved in Harry's life, but she was kind of like an outlier in that trio. So adding another member to that group really shifted the dynamics, which is very common, like, I would almost liken it to like a nuclear family, like a parent with a single child having another child. Like, that changes the whole family dynamic just in and of itself. So absolutely. Okay.
Okay. So I'm gonna tie these two together.
Oh my God.
All right. So I think the reason Ginny isn't part of the family is precisely because chosen family isn't chosen. It's random. Like, the people you...
Wait, Irvin, do you agree with me?
No.
No. That's what I thought.
I'm done.
Done. Family is random all the time. I think part of the reason we borrowed the term family from nuclear blood institutional family and applied it to friend groups is to reflect how that randomness sort of becomes this weird, like, alchemical thing. The trio, I very much consider to be a family, and it's completely random. But it just so happened that Harry sat down in the car with Ron, that they saved Hermione from the troll, because Ron was a little bitch to her earlier, and just after that, they were a family. And so Ginny could sort of never quite catch up to that, because they already had pretty much become a family, I'd say, by the end of second year, at which point Ginny was just on the periphery, and so she didn't come on the quest with them because she wasn't part of that family, she wasn't part of that unit. And I think if family was what you chose, then going from 0, they would have chosen Ginny, but because of randomness, she didn't end up there. And anyway, so yeah, so I think she never got to catch up to them, and I think they loved her very much, and eventually she, like, I think the quartet would have become a family, but they weren't there in Deathly Hallows. And for me, the reason the trio is so very obviously a family goes back to Order of the Phoenix, when Cho Chang is flipping out on Harry, that he doesn't want to talk about Cedric with her. And she's like, I need to talk about it, don't you understand? And he's like, well, I talked about it with Ron and Hermione a little, and other than that, and she loses her shit, and we're all just like, well, yeah, because it's Ron and Hermione, like, of fucking course you talk to them about it. And same with Dumbledore and Half-Blood Prince, where he's like, alright, so don't tell people about the prophecy or Horcruxes, but Ron and Hermione are cool. Like, so yeah, so they are next level, they're like beyond friends, like, they are a unit, they are a family.
They have clearance level.
Quick response, just really quick.
Super quick response.
I already forgot what I was gonna say, never mind. Sorry.
I'm gonna, Margaret, you had your hand up, and then
Yeah, it keeps getting changed, what I'm gonna say too, so maybe you'll go together.
Yeah.
No, I was thinking, when you were talking, I don't know if it's just me uniquely, but I have lots of families with different definitions. There's the work family, there's the high school I went to where we consider ourselves sisters, but each of them is at a different level. So, but within those groups, there are families that I'm gonna define them as nuclear, even though they may not be, they are the core group. So randomly, work families, because I've been working with nurses, work 12 hours a shift, you're living with these people.
Yeah.
So when we used to work, there were certain people that I randomly ended up on the floor with. Didn't choose them, they were
Right.
there. Who became, one woman who almost became like my mother, who I still think of as a second mother. And her kids are my age and they consider me a sibling. So that kind of developed, and that was a random choice. We didn't pick that. I live across the street from people when I was growing up. I was an only child because I had a brother who was ill, who could not do anything, who seized and was incapable of doing anything. So I grew up as an only child even though I had a sibling. Grew up with a family across the street who had 5 children. Kind of like a Weasleys, that we went in. They considered me their sister. To explain my relationship to one of the guy's wives when he was getting married, he changed his wedding date because I couldn't make it. How do you explain that to his wife? She now knows me well enough and she trusts me. That was a hard thing to do.
Yeah.
It's a really difficult situation. And this whole family must go, what the hell is this woman?
Who is this person?
Right, and I am about, the oldest one is 4 years younger than me. And one of the siblings, like we were talking one day, and one of them, she's slightly crazy, and she goes off on a tangent, she doesn't talk to anybody, and she gets angry, and she goes crazy. She treats me exactly like she treats her brothers and sisters. I said, well, that's how much I know she loves me. And they looked at me, I said, because she treats me exactly like she treats you. I said, she would die for you, and she would probably die for me, but she treats me like crap, but I know that in the long run, I said, she doesn't treat anybody else like that. And they're like, you know what, she does treat you like she treats us. I said, yeah, think about it. So but there's like, so I have like compartmental families. I have my family that I grew up with, that's my actual nuclear, my blood family. There are members of that I would never want to see, that's fine, they're there, I don't wish them any good luck, I don't want. But there are others that I would be happy to spend a lot of time with, which I do. So there's that family. There's the people that were my work family who are now like my trio. There was a bunch of us, we traveled together, we went all over the place together. My friend Christine, everybody seems to think is my sister. Everybody thought she was my sister when I first introduced her because our dynamic is siblings. And I'm her son considers me the nephew. So I don't know if it's just uniquely me, but I have little families all over the place that are families amongst friend groups, you know what I mean? So amongst the group of friends, there are some that I might be closer friends to, but there's a little beyond a close friend, so I don't know how to define that. Just like when you were saying it, I think random, yes. Sometimes you pick people. Like if there's 25 of you here, I might pick specific people that I want to be, closer friends with. But sometimes it's just like, they're across the street from you, or I work on the same floor with you.
The same train home for 10 years.
For 10 years. It's kind of like, so I don't know if it's, my definition of family is a bit more broad than most people.
No, I agree with that.
Right, so that's what I'm saying, like,
we're in agreement.
Right, so I think
a lot of people are.
Yeah, and I think that's what I kept hearing, like, I'm like, I can't really define family for myself, or I pick who I want, so for myself, maybe I am defining it. I define family for myself amongst every one of these different groups. And I've actually gotten all of them together, and it's really weird when you get them all together.
Very strange.
It's very strange dynamic, because the friend was like, does she really do that at work? I never knew she'd do that, but it's completely weird to put them all in one. And I have done that, like all of my family together, and it's a weird dynamic.
It doesn't always work. I'm gonna just respond really quick, and then Francis.
I have my favorite bottle. I remember it now. It was to your earlier comment about why didn't Ginny go? Because it wouldn't have made any sense plot-wise.
That's also true.
Literally would have ruined the book. You would have not had the why is she with him? Why are they together? I'm Bron. I'm jealous. It just wouldn't have made sense. That was my comment.
So I just wanted to respond really quick, and then Francisco, to get to your point. I hear the words random and choice a lot, and I just want to say, like, as like the very wise therapist in the room, literally everything in this world is random. Whether it's biological family, genetic family, institutional family, whatever you want to call it, versus the family that you choose or that you develop to have that choice, that is 100% random. The difference is the active choices that you make once you meet them. So in your case, you're saying, like, you've met these people randomly and they made active choices every day to become closer with them. You made active choices to maintain those friendships, just like somebody who is born into a family that is toxic makes an active choice to either stay in that family dynamic or leave it. You can't help who your parents are, you can't help what your genetics are, those are all random. You can choose to do things that you do despite them. So that was my blanket statement as the very
You're very good
honest
at
person.
blanket statements, by the way.
Huh?
You're great.
Thank you!
You should just sell blanket statements.
Blankets with
statements on them. Oh my God, somebody market it.
Etsy store.
See ya.
A quick question. It also just kind of like bothered her.
That's a
Can you all tell this is my family?
Because through the canon, Chris Child. That is actually a
Fuck
scene.
you.
That is literally like, I wanted to be part of that trio, and I knew I could never be a part. That is
Right.
literally like,
She does it.
and she laments. Like I saw her, like the closeness of that knit, and I knew I could never be a part. So there's, and it's canon. They changed the logo. The logo matches now.
That's true.
So it's like,
Officially canon according to the marketing team.
Yeah, because if they scream it loud enough, we'll believe them.
Yes.
It was J.K. Rowling inspired.
What's my time check?
it's 9 o'clock. I don't know how fun
Should we wrap?
Yeah, it's about 9.
Do we end at 9?
No, we
No,
usually
no.
wrap at 9 and end at 10.
Okay, so I wanted to, if anybody else, does anyone else have any responses or things that they really wanted, like burning questions that they really want to get out before I move on?
Do we want to raffle before you move on?
Cool, sure.
Okay.
Oh, you bought somebody trustworthy? I didn't buy any tickets.
Okay, you're loud.
I am loud.
Reach in and read a number.
Everybody get out your tickets if you haven't already.
Let's while John's in the bathroom.
Oh, do we want to wait for John to come back?
No.
So he doesn't have tickets.
My new rule is don't wait for John to do anything.
My rule is just leave John in the tray while he
Yeah,
sleep.
yeah, same. Agreed. All right, this one's speaking to me. The number is 791-899.
Are you serious?
Wow.
Bingo!
Bingo? This is not the bingo meetup.
You just find a friend you can't hack in the
Check his ticket.
No, I like cats.
791-899.
No, but you like my cat.
You got it.
Your cat is
You
acceptable.
only bought half.
Yeah.
That's pretty good.
All you need is one lucky one.
That's true. You only gotta play once to win, as they say with the New York lottery. Okay. It's true.
Such a damn cute cat.
I think you have.
He's gonna rock that hat this weekend.
Hell yes.
No, no, Tuesday.
Alright. So,
They say that this.
You weren't supposed to pick Urban.
I'm sorry. It kept floating away and coming back to my fingers, so I was like,
Oh, he was warning you.
it was like, no.
No, don't pick me.
Why? Because I still have the last one.
It's alright, it's like part of the meeting or shit.
Would you like first child stickers?
I would bingo list.
Back to the meetup.
I feel like I totally missed what you were saying. Just
I also have somebody.
Are you okay?
I'm pretty sure.
Sorry, do you want to see it?
I'm pretty sure what I said and what Margaret said was
One day I want.
But I don't agree that the trio are only
But you're distinction between choice and random. I'm like, yeah.
Because that was the.
Guys, pay attention.
Yes.
Do we want to take like a 5-minute break and then we can
Yes.
in a few minutes?
Yes.
I think so, yeah.
Because that was the thing.
Talk amongst yourselves.
I feel like so like the phrase chosen family, take the word chosen and take away its meaning just for a second and apply it to basically what Margaret was saying. That's what I
Using the phone call attention.
It's so bad. It's a form. It's a statement. I got it. You know what the best side of the Bari? Yeah, I came out on the shot. It was coming well ahead of
Right. But like everything happens random. Like everything next to her, like one time, and now we're gonna
discussion over?
No.
Oh, great. Okay.
We successfully did the raffle without you.
You know I can hear everything in there, right?
Did we discuss the plan to just always leave you on the train?
I can sit next to someone on a bus and then
Garbage down there like it used to be.
Where's the bag Jake just gave you?
oh, I had a really good time.
Oh, I put that all over there.
My head on